I love it for its sake and doing it for its sake. I don't think I've ever done any of it I mean, it's been nice to earn money through it, but if I wasn't earning money through it, I would do it anyway.
Filmmaker Magazine presents Back to One with Peter Rinaldi.
Joanna Scanlan is an actor. She sat down with me in cyberspace to talk about the work. Do you have a typical way that you like to approach a new character when you first get a new script?
I read the script. There's the first and last step. Yeah, I read the script. Now, what I've found lately, and not lately, but I mean, as I've done more, I guess, over the last 10, 15 years, is I've started to realize, because there's so much involvement in the development of scripts, there's often pieces of the script, as it were, that are missing by the time I get to read it. So there's all sorts of background stuff that's been cut, orphans of lines which don't really connect up, So having said I read the script, I then also have got this weather eye on the fact that there's assumptions made for the reader of the script by the team, by the creative development team, whether it's a combination of writers, executives, and producers of various kinds, about things that they think they still see in the script because they've read layer after layer after layer.
Right.
And I'm just reading this last bit. So sometimes they leave out really hugely important things in error. And so it is always in conjunction with a conversation with somebody, with preferably the writer or the director or somebody who's been there right from the beginning. So, there'll be just aspects of the character that don't make sense. And you think, oh, okay. So she was when you started this, she was a psychiatrist. Oh, yeah, that makes sense of that moment. So I think it's a bit of for me, I try to use my head to begin with, to grasp as much of the sort of factual elements of who this person may be, the socioeconomic elements, the sort of plotting, how it sits in the story, how that character sits in the story. And it's easy with a leading character, but if it's a supporting character, sometimes you have to ask yourself, why is this person here? What function are they playing for this story? And often you'll be sort of told, maybe by a casting director or something, it's a lovely part, lovely scene, darling, with so-and-so, some A-lister or something. And you go, oh, lovely, lovely. And then you look at it and you think, this hasn't got any role in the story whatsoever. And so therefore it shouldn't really be here. I mean, I have gone to readings and said to producers, you want to cut me, you want to get me out of this because there's no function. It's left over from some, as I say before, some previous draft. And they've looked at me and gone, no, because they wouldn't want to be rude. But actually, in the end result, I've generally been right. That there's just no purpose to this character. So that's how I try and approach it. Is almost a kind of a very reasoning process, a very rational sort of knowledge-based gathering at the very, very top of the experience.
And you're making me realize that an actor is so useful to a screenwriter in that very early stage of being able to be this informed reader on what this is. You know what I mean? And it's just what you're saying. It's like, hello, this character, you may be hauling in all this old stuff that's not there anymore. And that's why you think this is a full thing. It's not here. It's just not here. And a lot of other things that are just holes and stuff that's carried over from, like you're saying, old drafts, right? I mean, wouldn't it be nice if that was like an open kind of a process where the actor is almost starting out more as a final reader in a way, and then the collaboration could kind of start from there.
Yeah, and they would give you a fresh analysis, I guess.
Yes.
I mean, this is also true on the floor at the end of the day, so from that first read through to the moment when you're about to shoot, it's really only an actor on whom every single aspect of the filmmaking lands.
Right.
On that moment. And it's often an actor who can say, that doesn't add up because, yes. And you look at directors and producers who have been working on something for 5-10 years, and they'll go, oh, I never saw it from your character's point of view before. And the actor invests, by the time you're on the floor, the actor is that person. They've merged. And so there's a piece of information that they can give. Now, obviously, we have all the ability to edit, which means that can be resolved one way or another, whether it's at the very worst in an ADR or at the best in just a reordering of scenes or something like that. But it's only that person who really can give you the perspective, the 360 perspective of the whole story.
Yes.
And not just the story, but also the makeup they were wearing, the continuity elements, the things like that in that moment. It's really only that person. And I see it time and again on the floor, and I just think, oh, that's wonderful. Yes. Because I didn't see it because I wasn't playing that character.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah, of course. And so there's something about the beginning and the end of the involvement with your character, the first read through to the first take, which is so special. Yeah. It's special. You have this privileged role with this character, and those characters are the speakers of that story.
So you're talking about it almost as if you're reading it with your head. You're approaching this intellectually, almost like a researcher in a way. What's the point where that kind of gets put away and you start to transition into kind of the emotional makeup of this person?
Yeah, there's a moment comes when you're your imaginative relationship with the situation that your character is in begins to start building for me. And that is usually around speaking the dialogue. Now, it's not really about the dialogue, but somehow that allows you into the situation. And sometimes that might be with, you might be doing it with a dialect coach or something. And so you're firstly, you're just working on the accent, but then something happens and you connect with the situation that your character is in. This is maybe after having gathered quite a lot of other aspects like physicality, maybe your character has something very physical about them that you've made a choice about, but it's a number of different things. And then suddenly you for me, it's like a click into, oh my God, that's it's all as if she's revealed to you from the inside. So I think I'm a bit of an outside in. Mm-hmm. And then the in gets bigger and bigger and it becomes inside out. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Something like that for me. Mm-hmm. And it's so ultimately it's about trusting myself to have the right feelings, because I think the performance ultimately is about feelings wholly and purely, both mine and others. Others as in the person you're playing the scene with, the other actor and the other actor's character, and also just as you were saying about how you feel you might relate to actors, the director, the camera operator, every other person, every other crew member in the room. Mm-hmm. is also participating for me in the feelings that are taking place in the moment of filming. And those are what you're trying at the end of the day to harness to tell this story.
So
that's how I feel.
What happens when you're in an environment where it's not matching the feelings you need to be at? Do you know what I mean? How do you adjust based on what you're seeing around you to kind of make that work for you?
It depends on a director at that point. I go two ways on that. One is you get what you get and you edit that. And there's a kind of maybe it isn't what you expected to get, but there's maybe a way that will work as well. So there's a kind of, the sort of capturing that cinema is, the cinema process is, and you have to trust, all of you have to trust there's something in that's going to work, but it's all about editing that. And then the other aspect of it, I think, is working with the director intimately. So if you can have an intimate, I don't know what the word is, a sort of complicity maybe with a director, and even become, with some directors, is in my experience, it's been possible to be almost sort of psychic with that. You're almost on a, you're talking to each other without having to articulate, because you've kind of gone into something very intimate. And that can be quite supportive and cozy and kind of secretive and like little kind of loverish, sort of best friendy kind of thing. But it could also be quite antithetical. It can also be quite tense and difficult, but you're still in a complicity with that person. And I think that it's that is one aspect of, if they think they're not getting what they want, there is a way of accessing an actor that can change what the actor is offering. But that it involves a deep commitment from a director and an actor towards reaching out to each other and going beyond what your initial feelings of, wanting to please and control and power and, number of other kind of things that are in the room at the time.
And I imagine it also involves not being scared of whatever energy is around, right?
Oh, 100%. Yes. Oh, yeah.
Like you're basically saying, almost like you hate this person. Okay, well, use it because you can still make something there.
Oh my God, yes. Absolutely. Whatever is there, you got to be in it and feel it and not divert from it, not go anywhere different, not fight it. Well, you can fight it, but you're fighting yourself, you've got to be there. Yeah. And because I do think, I don't know if this is true, but in my perception, what ends up on the screen is what's actually happened in that moment. Because the camera seems to be able, X-ray-like, to get the psychological kind of, skeleton of everything that is happened in that moment, every single feeling. And those are things that are not just about what the actor is thinking that their character is playing, but also what actually was playing. And when those things, sometimes those amazing performances come out of a confluence of all of those elements, which is part of what I think is this mystical unknowability, because that you cannot legislate for. You can't, So I think that you have to be open to whatever it is you're feeling, every single feeling, no matter how uncomfortable. And then you have to harness that in a conscious or semi-conscious way, at least, towards camera, sound, and story making.
Speaking of Mary in After Love, this wonderful performance you give, one of the first things that I was captured by was the moment, as Mary, you were doing the prayer. in the beginning. And I found an interview that you did. It was interesting to see that learning that prayer was a breakthrough for you, right? I want you to talk about this, because I think the reason why I'm so fascinated by this is because you were saying that you needed some way into her faith life. And this was the way in, and it wasn't so much about learning this prayer. It was some kind of like, it feels like almost like a mystical thing that happened that was allowed you to be able to portray her faith life.
Yeah. So in terms of Mary's faith and the story of, you've got a slightly complex set of coordinates here, because you've got a white working class woman who's grown up in a white working class culture, who has married a Pakistani man. So there's a Pakistani culture, immigrant culture coming into her world, into her life, that she then embraces and adopts, including the language of Urdu. Then on top of that, Islam, the language of Islam, prayer is Arabic. So there's sort of almost at least 3 different, very clear languages that are being spoken, voices, accents, places. And so I had for this film, I had a very short amount of preparation time. I was on another job, and I only had, I think, 2 weeks from the end of that job to the starting of this job. I call it a job, but you know what I mean. And it was really, I thought, how am I going to, master this? There's a lot to get hold of, particularly the prayer, the learning of a language that you don't know what you're learning it syllable by syllable, because you don't know exactly what the breakdown of the meaning is, and make that real. So there were 2 things that happened for me in the process. I mean, I spent time in the mosque, so that was observing relationships with faith in situ. The women, because the mosque is segregated in the women's section, and there's 2 different, the mosque that I was attending, there's two different, very, very different vibes in the male area and in the female area. And in the mosque that I was attending, the female area was very welcoming, lovely, thick carpet. People were lying on it. They were praying, but they were also looking at their phones and chatting. There was a kind of, it felt very faithful, but at the same time very welcoming. So I kind of took that in. I to embrace that sort of warmth, if you like, of the nest of this place of faith. I also went back into my own childhood, because I was born and raised a Catholic. Went to a convent school before Vatican II had happened. So we were praying, going to church and doing the rosary and the Angelus and various things like that in Latin. And I mean, I was a very young child, so I don't have a massive grasp of it, but I do have a grasp of the sort of very ritualized times of the day, and also the nuns, the way that they had their times of the day between, matins through to vespers and compline, and I watched them and observed them, and I thought there's something about this structure of the day that's similar to the prayer structure, right, within Islam. And also what was very important that Alim kept talking to me about was this very casual, almost throwaway element of prayer making, that it's not, you're not doing it in a hugely reverent way. You're doing it so frequently that it's just like a casual kind of, you've got to toss it off. It's just very blah, blah, blah. And I thought, how am I going to get that in 2 weeks? Learn it.
So you're
and
saying
then
not only do it right, but then do it right as if you've been doing it this way 5 times a day for years.
Yeah. And even though, of course, as a convert to Islam, she probably would be a little bit more sort of formal about it, perhaps, than someone who'd grown up with it as a child. Nonetheless, it still had to have an element of, relaxed center to it within her body. And so I was struggling to learn it, and we did a little kind of pre-shoot before the film started, which was the drone shots, which actually are the very end of the film, which of the, the going out over the White Cliffs of Dover.
Yeah.
And so, I was sitting on the White Cliffs of Dover trying to learn and stuff in between drone arranging drones, and Talid Solomon, who plays Solomon, his mum was there, and she is Syrian refugee who they live in Paris, and she's a Syrian refugee. And I said, "Oh, do you think you could help me? Would you just say the prayer for me?" Because I'd heard lots of different versions of it, and say the namaz prayer for me. Just can I maybe just put it on my phone and I can just go away with it? Mm-hmm. And I did that. I put it on my phone, and she said this prayer in the most exquisite, transcending way. I was right in through her into the place which is beyond words, that is truly spiritual and not of this world. And even though it was a language, I knew what it meant, but I didn't really know what it meant. I didn't know what it meant as in opening up your whole being. And I took it away, and from that moment I never had a doubt about where to place the performance in relation to the faith, and that combined with spending time with Alim's mum, who has in herself a natural, really beautiful humility, which I sort of would often think of her as well. I'd sort of bring her into my mind and think, here am I, I'm a kind of confused, like all actors, not all actors are confused, but all actors are complex. I don't know an actor who isn't complex, isn't, going in lots of different directions in themselves, and often is sort of, in a way we're a breed who tend to be a little bit kind of unrooted and homeless in our kind of essence. There's something about us that's always looking around and to observe and not feeling belonging or heart of something. You're the liquid rather than the solid object. Yeah. And so sometimes I just needed to bring her into my mind because she is very inspirational, and it's partly her natural humility. I'm not a humble person, I'm sorry to say. I wish I was, but I'm not. I'm always critiquing and judging, and I'm quantifying and qualifying. Mm-hmm. And this was not the case for Alim's mum, who is the inspiration for the character in his writing. Mm-hmm. So that was helpful too in terms of faith. She doesn't have a questioning faith.
Right. You said in the beginning, and it's echoed here in what you just said, this idea that in the beginning you were saying, like, it's not the actual word, the actual dialogue. It's the idea of getting something from the words. And here it's a similar thing. You're not talking about, you were accessing something through the idea of words. I want you to talk about this because there's something about, because you both times you were stressing, like, it's not about the actual words. It's about them being a door opening or something to you.
Yeah, I think I sort of feel like we need to call on the whole French linguistic professorial kind of world here, because where you're looking at language as limited and completely failing, that language fails to convey what it is we want to express through it.
Right.
Consistently fails.
Right.
But we nonetheless want to play within that game of language and look for something that is between language or outside of language. I mean, I literally don't have, I know there are many philosophers who would be able to actually put this very succinctly. And I'm probably mixing up lots of different versions, but I instinctively do feel that's how I feel about what language does. I really want to be able to say it and say it perfectly and so that you can understand me, or that I can understand my character. I really seek that very deeply, but at the same time, it will never happen to the intention, to the level of intention that I have. I can't be fulfilled. So and yet we strive. And so I think it's in that striving that the outside of language comes. And in the outside of language is this feeling and presence that you then play with as an actor.
And speaking of, this outside of language, there is so much of this performance, particularly in the beginning, in the first half, I would say, that you're doing without words. I mean, so much. How did you approach that kind of acting?
Well, in the case of After Love, there were a few more words than, there was always a lot of, in each page of the original script, there was a big chunks of action rather than dialogue, but nonetheless, there were more words than we ended up with on the screen. Mm. And I think this takes me back to my kind of original notion about how scripts get developed, that you can end up putting into a script things that it's necessary for a reader, maybe a financier or a commissioner of some kind, to understand the story or to understand whatever the point of that beat. But in the actuality, an actor can do that in their face. They can maybe make that very same emotional, a whole 2 lines of dialogue, which is, I'm feeling terrible about the way that I, just got that news from my doctor, but one look coming out of the doctor's waiting room will do that for you. Right. And so I think that's part of it, is that you embody and physicalize plot, story, to a certain extent. And you also, I think the beauty of cinema, which I do make as a distinction with television actually, is that storytelling can be done in landscape, as it were. You're telling your stories with framing and picture making that is different from TV, which is very often much closer and much more, the actor's face again is doing a lot of the work, but it's the actor's emotions rather than the whole shape of the frame. And then go back to, how do you do this, or what is it that you're doing? It's again back for me to feeling. I'm just trying to feel it and feel whatever's really there. So let's say we're walking along that cliff in After Love, and I had to walk through the grass, and it all looks rather nice and, kind of pastorally beautiful. But actually the ground underneath me is really uneven, and my shoes aren't quite right, and the handbag is falling from my shoulder, and I try to make all of those things work in that moment. Mm-hmm. So instead of thinking, oh my God, my handbag's about to fall off the shoulder, we're going to have to cut, I'm going, I just pull my handbag back onto my shoulder because this ground is really uneven, and I can't quite walk at the pace that I wanted to. And I feel the awful kind of awkwardness of whatever that real thing is, and just feel it and be it for that moment or two. Mm-hmm. And then Aleem takes that and uses it against another moment before or after to construct that story. So I think it's just about almost a responsibility I have as an actor to be in whatever I've been placed within and really be there.
Do you find that it works best for you to have some kind of rehearsal for film, or is it that you like to just roll and see what happens?
Again, I think that's dependent on tone and style a bit, because, you know, if you're doing something on camera that is really fast, for example, very fast dialogue with somebody else in the scene, and it needs to be, you know, it needs a you can't achieve that. You just, you know, something that's massively proppy, and you've got to, you know, turn the tap on at the same time as the diddler, you know, and then be speaking something very quickly. I think that's very hard to do without a bit of rehearsal. But I always try it's not commonplace these days to rehearse very much. I mean, some people like to, some don't. But I always like to try and grab my fellow actors and sort of, you know, behind, you know, in hotel rooms or in cars.
Wherever you can, right?
Wherever I can, and preferably where no one notices that we're doing it and they don't come starting to earwig and say, can we listen in? You know, I try to build, I mean, because this is the other thing, isn't it? You're not on your own as an actor, generally. I mean, Mary happens to be on her own quite a lot in that film, but generally you're with other people. And I love working with other actors. So yeah, I love what they do. I love the play of it. I love the being together. So from that point of view, rehearsal is wonderful. And you know, I'm not in A-list films with loads of stand-ins where people just sort of emerge onto the set and kind of, it all just happens and it's been rehearsed elsewhere by, you know, an acting coach or something. That's never been my world. My world has always been quite, you know, sort of more theatre-based or just more small budgets, and it just doesn't feel like that. I remember when I did a film actually with Michelle Pfeiffer, was the first sort of A-list person I'd ever been in a room with. I mean, real superstar for me. And so I was a little bit nervous about how we were, you know, how I was going to serve her, I guess, in the scenes. And this was in Stardust, which I guess was shot in early 2000s. And we started to play the scene, and she looked at me. She just looked at me. And then suddenly she wasn't an A-lister, and I wasn't like number 75 on the call sheet. And we played the scene. And I thought, oh my God, even Michelle Pfeiffer, she's got her own special trailer. She's got a chef. She's got a whatever, you know, an agent in America she's calling. But we're just two human beings playing together in that moment. And I thought that made me understand that I had permission to be an equal. Well, everybody's an equal in that world. Ultimately, I mean, you might not seem it, but actually, if you're going to play a scene, you have to be together as equals. And that's a really beautiful experience.
You said somewhere that a doctor once said to you, if you don't get back to acting, you're going to be ill for the rest of your life.
Yeah, he did.
And this was when you were pretty young. You were teaching, I think. Teaching acting and teaching drama. I guess I want to lead that into a question, which is, in other places you've said, you just love to do this. Like, you love the idea of auditioning. And you thought, if you don't get the part, there's another audition tomorrow and you get to act again. And hearing this, I'm just like, there may be something, like people say persistence or fortitude is what you need, talent, of course. But is there anything to the idea of just loving this? Is there any, like, loving it and wanting to do it all the time? I mean, doesn't that actually matter? And it seems like it mattered to you. And that's what actually helped you, right? Get to where you are. Just the idea of loving this.
That's all I've ever done. I can tell you, all I've ever done is just do it again, you know, the next day for the love of it. I mean, truly for the love of it, the love of the game of it, the fantasy of it, the play of it, the meaning, making meaning out of life. that, and you're absolutely right. I mean, when in the years when I would go to lots of auditions, I mean, sadly now they tend to be online or whatever, but in person, you'd be in the room and you'd have a script and it would be great, you could play, and then they'd say, oh, let's adjust that a little bit, and you go, oh, great, I'm going to take a direction, I'm going to throw it back, I'm going to try and do that, I'm going to hit that, I'm going to, it's just enormously good fun. Acting is tremendously good fun, trying to get better, do it better. And in that sense, I think it's like a bit like being a musician. I mean, you don't get musicians who wouldn't, they might have an album out, they might not, but they're still going to be playing. They're still going to jam. I love it for its sake and doing it for its sake. I don't think I've ever done any of it it's been nice to earn money through it, but if I wasn't earning money through it, I would do it anyway. I'd be in my local amateur dramatic production of The Importance of Being Earnest tomorrow if nobody was going to pay me.
Joanna Scanlan, thank you so much.
It's been my absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Back to One is a production of Filmmaker Magazine, which is a publication of The Gotham, formerly IFP. Listen to back episodes of this podcast at filmmakermagazine.com or wherever you get your podcasts.